Hi, good evening, Club Soda. So, I'm the founder of Meditation Unlocked, an event series that's designed to nurture mental well-being for modern life. So, Laura, a few weeks ago, asked me to say a few words to you guys about meditation. So, what we're going to talk about a little bit about me and how I got into meditation. Why is it relevant now? What is it? Some of the common myths, how it works, some of the science behind it, and also how you can get started. So, a little bit about me, and I've also got various notes here to help me out. So, a little bit about me to start. I had a 10-year corporate career in high pressure roles in London and Hong Kong. And then at the age of 30, I had a sudden and very serious stroke, which was, as you can imagine, quite a big wake up call in life. And that was that basically led me directly to yoga. I was forced into yoga, which then led me into meditation. And I recovered and I started my first business, which is a property business. And that's a 6-year-old business now, which I still run today. And during that time, a few things happened. One of which is that my relationship with alcohol changed after having an incident like that. So young in life, I had to reassess so many things, and one of them was my relationship with alcohol. So I went back to drinking and drinking occasionally, but about 3 years ago, I stopped drinking completely. And for a year, I didn't touch a drop of alcohol, and now I drink very, very, very occasionally. But I have a very clear relationship with alcohol. Like 90% of the time, I'm not drinking. So that's something I've got in common with you guys. And meditation certainly played a part. I didn't really understand what part that played until more recently, but it's played a part. So that's a bit about my background and who I am. For me, meditation has really been a secret weapon that's helped me to sharpen my edge in business and in life. And I've had so much benefit from it that I started Meditation Unlocked to help share some of those benefits with people that I just felt weren't being served very well. So that's that. Moving on. So why now? Why has meditation become so prominent now? We all know that meditation is thousands of years old. There's lots of evidence in that, cave paintings and references to it in religion and so on. It's been around for a long, long, long time. So why has it become so relevant now? Well, actually, meditation had a bit of it became fairly popular in the 60s and 70s because of the Beatles and things like that. And then it's had a bit of a lull, but in the last few years, it's become much more prominent. And now we hear about celebrities who are into meditation, and it's on the cover of Time magazine, and it's regularly in the news. I think most people have at least heard of meditation. I think the reason it's become prominent now is because of the world that we've created, which is this incredible, super convenient world, but at the same time, it's always on. We're overstimulated. We always have access to everything in our pockets through these supercomputers. We have our email. We have all these different things that we can do 24 hours a day. And as a result, that's actually led to a rise in stress and anxiety that's coming from these very same technological innovations and so on. And personally, I think that's why meditation has become much more popular in recent years. If we look at the chronology of things, it's just over 10 years since the first iPhone came out, and that was really the start of the smartphone revolution, to the point now where, at least in the Western world, it's completely normal for someone to have one, if not two smartphones. One for work, one for home sometimes. And going back before that a little bit, there was the BlackBerry generation. I mean, it all kicked off with email in the late 90s, but our fundamental relationship and the way with technology and the way that we live changed from all those things. And that's what's kind of led to a situation where now we always have access to information, access to entertainment 24/7, but it's also access to overstimulation, access to distraction. And I think many people don't really understand what that's doing to us at a mental level, at the brain level. So that's what I would say. meditation is one solution. It's not the only solution, but it is a powerful one for a lot of people, and it can have a lot of additional benefits. So that's why now. So let's get into what is meditation. This is the next thing, because I think most people that I talk to, they're aware there's this thing called meditation, and they've got a picture in their head of what it should look like, or what they think it looks like, and they know it's supposed to be good for them. But I think that's where that's where a lot of knowledge about it goes up to. So what is it? So first of all, what I say is that we talk about meditation in the singular because it's convenient, but it's actually an umbrella term for a series of different mental practices designed to develop the mind. And they come from all sorts of places all over the world, not just Buddhism or not just India, but actually there's meditation that comes from various different parts of the world and various different religious and cultural backgrounds. The correct analogy I would offer you is with sports or exercise, where running and boxing, if they're done in the safe manner, they're both good for us, but they develop us in a completely different way. And that's what I'd say with different meditative techniques to develop the mind in different ways. And this is something we're learning more and more about, and there's more and more clinical studies around this kind of thing. And I think we're going to become much more knowledgeable about these things over the next few years. Going back thousands of years, the initial goal of many meditative practices was to change states of consciousness and sort of connect with the divine, or whatever that means to those meditators from whichever culture they come from. Nowadays, that's not the reason why I think it's taking off. I think it's because it's just been shown to be a really effective solution that helps with a lot of modern day issues like stress and sleep and focus and anxiety and so on. So next thing, what can it do? So one meditation session is about as likely to change your life as one exercise session, which means that one is generally not enough. However, just like one exercise session, if it's delivered safely and if it's delivered in a robust manner, then it definitely will benefit your mind, but you may not really understand or feel that benefits beyond the immediate. So it like everything else, it takes a bit of long-term work to start feeling benefits. But again, just like exercise, I mean, you can change your energy levels and the way you feel within a few weeks to a couple of months. And I think meditation is quite similar in that sense, but it does take consistent practice. It does take work. There's so many different things that meditation or meditative practices can help. The 3 or 4 that I like to focus on that I think are really relevant for the Western world. One is accessing deep rest. This is something that I'll talk about a bit more. I'll talk about all of these a little bit more. So accessing deep rest is something it can really help with. Training our attention and focus is something else. And then learning to be okay with uncomfortable thoughts is another big benefit. And all of these 3 really help with habit change. They really help with, going back to club soda and people trying to change their relationship with alcohol, whether it's giving up completely or drinking a bit less or whatever it is. If we're more rested, more in control of our attention and focus, and more available, more able to deal with uncomfortable thoughts and situations in an optimal way, then all of those are going to support habit change much more than the opposite situations. There's quite an interesting thing that you could follow up on as well. There's a health psychologist in Stanford called Kelly McGonigal, and if you Google her and look for Kelly McGonigal, the willpower instinct, you'll find a talk that she gave at Google, and that was all. Her book, The Willpower Instinct, is all about habit change. I don't know if you guys have discussed that or talked about it, but in that talk, she talks a lot about how a meditation practice can really help with habit change. That's a bit more specific. I want to talk a little bit more about deep rest and training attention and uncomfortable thoughts. So I want to give you something a little bit more concrete on that. So let's start with deep rest. Where does this come from? So if we go back to the 70s, actually, there's quite a bit of research done then, which has become really relevant now. A chap called Dr. Herbert Benson, who was a Harvard professor and the founder of the University of Massachusetts Medical Center's Mind Body Institute, so hugely respected. He did a number of studies and coined the term the relaxation response. So again, that's something you can look up and look into. Dr. Herbert Benson, the relaxation response. But what he showed through his various studies is that certain meditative practices help us to access deep rest by starting to slow down our nervous system, and we can actually induce that on purpose rather than have it happen as and when it happens. So to go a little bit deeper into this, I don't want to blind you guys with science or anything like that, but these are all things that you can look up. The central nervous system has two primary ways of functioning, and that's with the sympathetic nervous system activated or the parasympathetic nervous system activated. The sympathetic, when that's activated, that's our flight or fight response. So that's going back to sort of how we're wired and how we've evolved. That's a set of physiological responses that are triggered when our brain perceives danger, whether that's physical danger or a perceived dangerous situation. So fight or flight, we're all fairly familiar with what that is and how that feels. It's basically when you're about to be in a road accident or, you can see a cyclist coming for you or something like that. A whole set of physiological things happen in a split second to put you in the optimum state to deal with that situation. So it's very, very relevant in physical situations. And we know what these things are. We know what the symptoms of this are in terms of adrenaline pumping, heightened sense of awareness, etc., etc. Now that is wired for survival. But the interesting thing is that if we perceive a harmful situation, then those same things can get triggered. Maybe not to the same extent and not as suddenly, but they get triggered. So, for example, a situation that makes us nervous, whether that's something like I'm about to give a big presentation at work, or we're about to go to a function with our other half where we're not going to know a lot of people, if that gives us social anxiety. It's that those things trigger those same feelings. But the thing is, if that system keeps getting triggered, it's been shown that it's not great for our long-term health. And the opposite of that is our rest and digest system, which is our parasympathetic nervous system, and this is when our body's healing systems all get turned on. And that's exactly what Dr. Herbert Benson was studying with his work around the relaxation response, and he was showing that certain meditative practices basically induce those responses. So it just means that we're purposely triggering the body's rest systems. And what that means is that, especially if you live in if you live in a big city or you have a really busy job or a really busy family life, we're all sleep deprived, and this is a way of just making sure that we're topping up our rest and that sort of thing. And then going back to Kelly McGonigal's work around willpower, one of the things that her work has shown is that if we are more rested, then we're more likely to support the habits that we want to. That the times when we slip our habits, when we reach for a drink or reach for the cookie jar or something like that, is when it's been shown as we're feeling a bit more tired and a bit more depleted, and we just have less resistance to doing those kind of things. So that's a deep rest. Training attention and focus. That is so. We've all heard this word mindfulness. It originates from Buddhist philosophy, and it's actually quite a nuanced subject. There's quite a lot of layers to it. However, mindfulness in its most basic form is paying attention, and mindfulness-oriented meditation practices systematically train attention. So I'll talk about another study, and this study is, and it's another Harvard study actually from 2010, and it's called "A Wandering Mind is an Unhappy Mind." And this was a study that was done over a period of 6 months, 2,250 people in the US, wide age ranges, socioeconomic backgrounds, yeah, really good sample size, and they collected over 250,000 data points. And what they showed was, first of all, around 47% of the time, people were not thinking about the thing that they were doing. I'm just going to repeat that and let that sink in. Almost half the time, people were not thinking about the activity that they were doing. That in itself is a bit, disconcerting a little bit. And I've been guilty of it myself. It's or I think anybody knows what I'm talking about here. But I would say something to bear in mind is that study was done 7 to 8 years ago. And in that time, we've seen a smartphone revolution, and I think attention levels have been decimated even more than they were then. So that in itself is interesting, but here's the really interesting bit. They also showed through their studies that this was the cause of unhappiness. So it wasn't that people were distracted and so then they became unhappy because of that. It wasn't that, I got that wrong. It wasn't they were unhappy and that was what was causing the distraction. They were distracted and they were unhappy about the fact that they were distracted. So it was shown that there's a direct correlation between attention and happiness. So that's interesting. Taking that a little bit further, there's this conception that, going a little bit into the common myth side of things, there's this conception that meditation is all about peace and calm and relaxation. And whilst it's true those things can happen, it's actually as much about learning to be okay with uncomfortable thoughts. And there's a lot of things in meditative practices that focus on learning to recognize thoughts for what they are, learning to recognize what power they have over us. And I think one of the biggest benefits of it is that it starts making us aware that we have a conscious choice. So rather than reacting automatically, again, a lot of the things that can trigger our behavior around things like alcohol and other addictive things is where our natural reactions are. I say natural because it's what's been created by a combination of our thoughts and our environment. I'm not laying any blame here, but I'm just saying that certainly for me, when I look back at my drinking habits, it was just because and I wasn't really consciously aware of my choice in that matter, and B, becoming consciously aware of like other important things like, what damage is this doing to my system and so on. But coming back to meditation, by systematically training ourselves to start becoming a bit more conscious and a bit more okay with uncomfortable thoughts, what that means is it creates a bit of a pattern interrupt. So it means that next time I go to reach for something that I don't actually want to be doing, because I've trained this way in my meditation practice, suddenly I find that, hang on a second, I realize I've got a choice in this matter. And often that's enough to change that behavior. I'm sure some of you can identify with what I'm talking about on that. So that is another big benefit of a meditation practice. Moving on from that, and if you have any questions about any of that, then drop a question in the comment box. If there's something that wasn't clear, if there's something you want me to expand on, please do, or write into Club Soda, and I'll be more than happy to kind of follow up on this and give a few more thoughts. I want to move a little bit into some of the common myths that we see around meditation. So I think the most common thing that someone says to me is that I can't meditate because I can't clear my mind. This is a really interesting one, because I think this conception has been created that those of us who have an established meditation practice, we're masters of our mind and we can clear it at will. And the thing is, that's simply not true. It's just one of those things that's kind of come about because of a certain image and certain things perpetuating that. But actually, meditation is not about learning to clear our mind. It's an incredibly difficult thing to do. It's much more about what I was talking about before just now, which is actually learning to be okay with what's going on in our busy minds. And over time, with that practice, our mind becomes less and less busy, and it becomes calmer, and we start recognizing more about what's going on. But if you've ever had that feeling or thought, I can't meditate because I can't clear my mind, the only thing I can say to you is that that shouldn't be a barrier, because that's rarely the goal of a meditation practice. Next one is, I can't meditate because I can't sit still. This is an interesting one. I mean, we are in a world where being busy is celebrated, doing things is equated to achievement, and this whole idea of sitting still, taking time for ourselves, it can feel incredibly selfish. It can feel like, well, I'm just sitting around doing nothing, and then the unspoken side of it is this fear of, will I be able to sit still for 15-20 minutes? The thing about this myth is that meditation practice is not about sitting like a statue for 20 minutes until your legs have gone numb, and the itch on the side of your neck is irritating you. It's just simply not true. The way that we run our meditation sessions at Meditation Unlocked is that, we make it so that people are comfortable knowing that they can move during a practice. And yes, there are some meditative practices where sitting still can be considered a bit of an advantage, but that's quite an advanced technique. It's not something that really most people need to get involved in. The idea that we need to sit still is just not a really irrelevant idea. Like, you can have a great meditation walking. There's some great walking meditation stuff out there. You can have a great meditation lying down, provided you don't fall asleep, which is not a bad thing in itself unless it keeps happening, because the goal of many meditative practices is not so we fall asleep, but so we become more awake around what we're doing. But these are some of the common myths. If you know of any sort of common myths or rather, if you've got any questions about meditation or conceptions, then drop me a comment in the comments box and I'll do my best to answer those. Moving on, just want to have a look at what the next thing is on my agenda. We've talked about why is it relevant now, what is it, what are some of the common myths. Just make sure I've covered everything. The next thing I suppose is, how do we get started then? Okay, we now know that meditation is something that could be really useful, for just fundamentally feeling better, being more effective, being happier, and also helping with things like stress and anxiety, and helping with things like habit change. So we know we want to do it. So how do we get started? So in this day and age, one of the simplest ways to get started is you could get started with an app. That's a really good introduction. It's really accessible. There are some apps that I'll give you the names of. A free one is called Insight Timer. There's so many meditations on that. It can be a little bit tricky to navigate, but if you look up and download Insight Timer, that's a good introduction. Headspace is the biggest app in the field. Again, you'll get a free trial with them, and you'll get some stuff there, so you can look into that. Another one that's quite good is one called Calm. That's one that I quite like. Again, you'll get a free trial with them. So this can be a good way. Next thing is that if you live in a city, then the chances are that your local yoga studio or Buddhist center will be running some sort of meditation classes. This can be a bit of a tricky one, because first of all, a lot of people may not want to go into a yoga studio or go into a religious center. I totally get that. But if that's not a barrier for you, that could be a way. It's a bit tricky because it's really hard to judge the sort of relevance and quality. But even so, as long as it's got a generally quite good reputation, if it's a yoga studio, then the chances are it will be at least a half decent practice to get started. If you're based in London, come to one of our Meditation Unlocked sessions. We do live sessions where we talk much more about the things I'm talking about here. You'll get a 25 to 30 minute fully guided meditation. It's really designed for the curious but skeptical. And also we talk a bit more about the science. We go into some of the specific studies in a bit more depth, and about certain subjects like focus, attention, anxiety, and so on. So, and if none of those things appeal, but you just want to start being kept abreast, there's some really good like books and other resources and guided meditations and stuff like that all around the web. One of the problems now is there's so much on the web that it's really difficult to understand what's high quality and what isn't. So what we do at Meditation Unlocked is that if you sign up to our mailing list, we send out a mailer once a week sharing the best resources that we're finding, the books that we've checked out and have read, some of the the good articles here and there, and then also things like guided meditations that we're finding that are really good, our own content from me and some of the other guides, that more and more, and we're going to develop that side of it more and more as well, so that we can reach more people. So that's pretty much everything that I wanted to say. Are there any questions? Is there anything that anybody wants to ask? No? Okay, well, just wanted to say thank you very much. Just to reiterate for anyone who's joining us late, we talked about meditation, we talked about how it can support habit change, and we talked about a bit more about, you know, what the distinction between various practices and why it's relevant now. If you've got any questions, you can reach me at via Instagram at medunlocked. I'm sure that we can share my personal Instagram with you guys. It's Niraj Shah with, but I'm not going to bother spelling that out for you guys. But yeah, just if you're curious about it, find a good option, give it a go. You can always contact me, and thank you very much for your time. Thank you for Club Soda for having me. Bye.